So you might want to stop owning rats for a number of reasons, whether these are your first pair of rats and you've just realised they're not the right pet for you, or you've owned them for years and years and it's just getting too sad losing them, or your circumstances have changed. Whatever the reason, it is okay, but how do you go about doing it? Now, there can be a really big stigma around rehoming your pets. Some people are always going to judge you for it, but if it's not working out, if you're not happy, or the pets aren't happy, or their needs are not being met, there is nothing wrong with admitting that you need help and rehoming those pets instead. Finding better for them is a really selfless thing to do. And that is going to be the #1 suggestion when it comes to how to stop owning any social animal. I don't have any issues with people rehoming for those kind of situations. The only time I think it is really bad is if someone drops off their elderly family dog to a shelter, especially when they are going to be put to sleep and don't really stand a chance of being adopted, and then the next week they go and get a brand new puppy. That's where it doesn't sit right with me, but in most situations, rehoming and finding a new home for your pets is a really good thing to do. So can't you just keep your last elderly rat once all of the others have passed away? No. So as with most aspects of owning rats, it does require a fair bit of forethought, and this situation is no different. You should be trying to plan ahead to make sure this doesn't happen and you're not left in a situation where you have got an elderly rat by themselves. But it can still happen. Sometimes you can lose so many rats at once that you are left in this situation, but it's really important to try to be proactive to make sure this doesn't happen. One suggestion you might see being given out that is quite common to do, say for example if you have a pair of rats, one of them has a tumour that's growing and starting to get pretty big, and then the other one suddenly has some sort of heart failure, kidney failure situation and needs to be helped and put to sleep. Oftentimes in that situation, the kindest thing to do, if the other rat with a tumour for example doesn't really have that long left, often it can be kinder to let them go together and let them pass away at the vets together instead, just to avoid all of that added stress that rat is then going to experience by itself, losing its friend, being alone when it's close to needing to be put to sleep and having a low quality of life anyway. Sometimes if you have 2 rats and the other one is not too far behind, letting them go together can be the kindest thing to do. Now, if that is not the case and the last remaining rat is still in relatively good health, you are going to have to look to rehome them instead to live with someone else that has other rats that they can live with. And yes, rehoming them, going through introductions is very stressful, especially on an elderly rat that might have other health conditions. But that's why it's so important to think about these situations before they happen. If you're getting to the point where you know you don't really want any more rats anymore, try to find a home for them before they get too old and too frail, where it is going to be very, very stressful for them. And I do recommend try to rehome them in pairs instead of just waiting until you've got one that's all by itself and old and stressed, just because it makes that transition into a new home so much easier. I had a similar situation with one of my mice recently. She was a single mouse after all of her friends passed away, and those introductions with my other mice were quite hard and stressful on her because she did feel like she was getting ganged up on. She didn't know any of the other mice and she didn't have that comfort and support and familiarity of the other mouse that she would have had if she was in a pair going into the group. So I do recommend trying to plan ahead and rehoming before it gets to that point, just to make it easier on those rats. Often people will say my rat is too old or sick or frail to survive going through introductions with new rats. And if your rat is just old, if they're 2 years, 3 years old, but don't have any serious health issues, they can still go through introductions and get those new friends in the last stages of life and really benefit from that. But if they do have serious health implications that mean they wouldn't survive introductions, or it would make those health issues worse, things like poor mobility or just being so frail and old and not being able to clean themselves, or having heart failure or respiratory issues that are quite serious, then I do think it is a quality of life concern as a whole that you should be really considering. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to put down your extremely old, sick rats, but it is something that needs to be looked at and considered, especially when that rat is by itself. That also lowers their quality of life, so definitely consider that. Either a rat is old but still good enough to go through introductions, or they are struggling and suffering slightly that their quality of life needs to be looked at. So how do you go about rehoming your rats if that is the conclusion that you've come to? If you got your rats from a reputable breeder, it's polite to ask them if they would like them back and if they can take them back where possible. Obviously, if you have any welfare or care concerns about the conditions the rats would be going back to, then by all means find another alternative, but most good breeders will take their rats back if you can't keep them for whatever reason. No judgment, just take them back. If for whatever reason they can't, if they don't have the space or they don't breed or keep rats anymore, a good breeder will help you find a new home for them instead. Giving your rats to a rescue is also an option. I would consider this more as a last resort though, just because so many rescues are at capacity and full, and I've got so many vet bills racking up. I would consider this as a last option because I think a lot of people view handing your pets into a rescue through rose-tinted glasses that they're going to be just adopted really quickly, and that's not always the case. Often as well, because they have so many animals to care for, they might not get the level of interaction and attention they're used to. So if you can hold on to them and find them a home yourself, if it's not an emergency situation, that can really help to take the strain away from rescues as well. So finding a new home for your rats yourself, there is a couple of ways you can go about doing this. The first one, if you are active within the rat community, is asking any of your rat friends if they can take them, or if they would want to take them, or know anyone else that can take them. That's probably the safest option because you know where they're going to and what kind of care they're going to get. Obviously, I appreciate not everyone knows anyone else in their state or country or area that even has or keeps rats, so that's not always an option. There is things like Facebook groups. Just check the rules on each individual rat group. Some of them don't allow you to post any rehoming posts, but there is a group in the UK called Rat Rescue UK, Rat Rehoming UK. I'll put the link in the description. Obviously, you've then got selling sites. Just be careful with these. Everyone on there does not always have the best intentions, especially when it comes to rehoming rats. Some people want them for other things that aren't pet related, which is not great. So just make sure you're really quizzing these people, asking to see their cage setup, where they're going to be kept, asking if they've got any other experience with owning rats before. They don't always need to have this. Just make sure they know the level of care these rats need and deserve, and they're not just wanting a quick pet that they have no idea how to care for. Make sure you are really vetting these people. If you don't know how to do this or don't really feel comfortable doing that, then I do recommend taking your rats to a rescue instead that can handle all of that for you, because it can be a bit of a minefield of really weird people messaging, wanting the pets, and not always having the best intentions. So what if you don't want to rehome your last couple of rats because you're just too emotionally attached to them, you would find it way too sad? I get that it's hard and you form such a bond with these rats especially if you have had them for the full 2 years or so of their lifespan. It is going to be very, very difficult. I have in the past previously recommended possibly contacting things like breeders and asking to foster their rats, a couple of their rats, until yours pass away. I don't recommend this as an option anymore because not many breeders are going to be comfortable doing this. A good reputable breeder views their rats as their pets, as their family. They're not going to want to just give them away to anyone, especially someone they don't have that relationship with. Possibly, maybe in some situations, if you have got rats from this breeder and they know you and they know their care, they might consider it, but not very likely because these rats are their pets just as much as our rats are our pets, and they're not going to want to see them go. A breeder is much more likely to offer your rats a space with their rats, to come and live out their days with them. That is much more likely to happen if you do contact a breeder or your breeder and explain your situation, and you're probably just going to have to come to terms with that as an option. It might not be your ideal thought when it comes to what happens with your last rats, but it's going to be the most common option. You could contact a rescue and see about maybe fostering some of their rats that are having a harder time finding a home. But again, I don't think a rescue is going to want you to do introductions with any of your rats instead, especially if there is a reason these rats aren't getting adopted as quick. So I don't think breeders, rescues, other people are going to offer this as an option as commonly as people might hope. So yeah, I would try to not rely on that as an option or a fallback because not many people are going to offer that. It is much more likely someone is going to offer for your rats to come to them. Something that I have considered as an option when the time comes would be maybe an option for other people is to, if you're on your last couple of rats, is to rescue some rats in a bad situation. You're then getting them out of that situation anyways, with the mindset that you're just rescuing or fostering them, and try to not get as attached. I know not everyone is going to be able to put themselves in that mind space, but try and just view them as a short-term, kind of temporary foster animal instead. Then start looking for a home for those rats once your rats pass away, and try to just detach yourself. Again, I know not everyone can do that, but that is also something to maybe consider. But yeah, I know it's not an easy topic to think about, and a lot of people get quite upset and defensive and stubborn when it comes to rehoming your last couple of rats. But if you've given them the utmost best care for their entire life, don't let the end be any different. Try to be proactive in finding them a new home before it becomes too late and too stressful and too hard on their little bodies. Try to think about this and come to terms with this. If you are having that niggling thought in the back of your head that you might want to stop owning rats in the near future, start to reach out to people, start to make a plan about what's going to happen with your last couple of rats, because ultimately not planning ahead is when rats start to suffer, and we don't want to see any rats being alone and being sad in their last couple of months. But that is the end of today's video. I know it's not the most cheery topic to think about, but it is something that people don't really consider when you're excited and getting rats for the first time. This is not even a thought in your mind. It definitely was not a thought in mine either when I first got my first couple of rats. But it is really important to think about. So I hope this has helped anyone if you're in this situation, or if you might be in this situation in a year's time, 5 years time. Come back to this video and kind of talk some sense into yourself about what to do. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Let me know what kind of rat videos you want me to do in 2024, ones that are a bit cheerier than this topic. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!